introduce everyone into what you're doing, your coaching, what's different about it. And then we'll kind of just go from there. How does that sound?
Sounds great, Joey. Thanks for having me on.
Okay. Yeah. So, you guys, this is my friend Will. I'm going to let him explain his life and the awesome things he does. And it's funny because I still talk about you to my clients. I'm like, oh, my friend Will, he climbs the highest mountains in the world. He does this, all these things. I'm always talking about you still. So, how I met Will, everybody, was in 2017. We sat together in an ayahuasca ceremony, and there was a lot that happened, not only for me personally, but having you there. I don't know if it was your first ayahuasca ceremony or the nature of how you ended up in the ceremony, but I do know that it was a lot around processing PTSD from you being in war. And I remember the person leading the ceremony allowed me to play drum at one point in the night. And it was the first time that I ever played drum in a ceremony, and I was kind of in and out, looking over the fire, coming back in. And then we shared a moment at the fire after the whole ceremony. And you had come up to me and talked to me about the drum. And you had shared with me kind of like what that did for you and kind of what was going on for you. And then, the next day when you had shared the different things that you were going through, one of the things that shifted my mindset permanently was the way that I view war. I've never met anyone, um, just briefly, but never sitting with someone like that and kind of witnessed the trauma, emotional trauma, spiritual trauma, physical trauma that a person, a soldier, goes through when they are in a situation like you've been in before. And I remember walking out of that and thinking, man, what are we missing in terms of war, whether it's pre-war, post-war, life after war? And I didn't realize the different levels or the depths of trauma or baggage or clutter or residue that can leave on a person, because on the outside in it's like, oh, here's this guy, he's a soldier, he's ready, he's on the outside, everything is still intact. But from my understanding, on the inside, it was not that.
Yeah.
And so that's how me and Will met. And we've been friends ever since. We've been on many different, hikes together. We've sat in many different ceremonies together. We've gone to coffee, we've hung out, inside and outside of ceremony. And so it's just been awesome, not only being in your life, talking to you, catching up, shooting the shit. It's not always around ceremony, but just in general, what's Will up to? And so I'm super happy to have you on and let everyone hear who you are. And I'll let you introduce yourself and go from there.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it, Joey. Yeah, and that was a big ceremony for me. And it's kind of interesting how I got to that war. I'll just share a little bit of a life story that's kind of got me to that ceremony with you. So it actually started in high school back in 1982. I went to a military boarding school, and every few months, a recruiter from the service academies would come around campus to recruit for the academies, and he'd carry a camera around his neck, but no one ever saw any of the pictures he took. So we used to call him the secret squirrel. So one day I went walked in my room, and he was in the room getting ready to give his recruiting pitch to my roommate. So again, this is 1982, and he says, "Listen, man, in the early 1990s, there's going to be a major conflict in the Middle East, and it's going to involve the largest troop mobilization since Vietnam." And he said, and they might reinstate the draft. The other thing he said is your survivability on the battlefield is going to be greater if you're an officer versus enlisted. And the best way to become an officer is to go to one of the service academies, West Point, Annapolis, Air Force Academy. So I ended up, something about his pitch really like resonated with me, right? I had never considered going to the military before that, but it resonated. So sure enough, in 1984, I ended up at the Naval Academy. Went all the way through the Naval Academy. Fast forward to the fall of 1980, no, the fall of 1990. Okay. Saddam Hussein had just invaded Kuwait. And sure enough, we mobilized troops. At the time he first invaded, I was at Army Ranger School doing some training and going through Ranger School. And between phases, found myself in a military surplus store buying some stuff, and in walks the secret squirrel. Okay, I hadn't seen that guy since I graduated high school, right? I walk up to him and I'm like, hey, do you remember me? He's like, oh yeah, it was like we were long lost friends. And I looked at him like, hey, do you remember back, in whenever you told me about the major military conflict in the Middle East and, largest troop mobilization, da da da. And he kind of smiled at me and he's like, yeah, that's quite a coincidence, isn't it? And I'm like, coincidence my ass. Like, you know, talk about like, conspiracy theory stuff. And sure enough, 4 months later, I found myself on the battlefield in Kuwait. And He lied about a couple of things. They didn't reinstate the draft, so that was bullshit. And then the other thing that was bullshit is when you have artillery shells coming down on your position, the shells don't know whether you're an officer enlisted, so you're dead either way. But obviously, I survived to tell the story. And then, ironically, a week before our ceremony, I had gone to a documentary called From Shock to Awe.
Oh
And
yeah,
it told,
yeah,
you may know that documentary. Yeah, it
yeah.
told about, PTSD veterans who were using ayahuasca and marijuana and MDMA to get through PTSD.
Real quick. How long
Mhm.
were you in the military for?
So I was at the Naval Academy for 4 years, and then I was in the Marine Corps for 5.
Okay.
So yeah, it was
Now,
about yeah.
leading up to the From Shock to Awe, which if anyone that listens to this hasn't seen it, I recommend it. It's a fantastic documentary. Did you know kind of like, man, I do have some PTSD. Were you kind of in that space, or were you still just kind of like head down, emotions off, I'm just getting through life?
Yeah, it was definitely latent. So like, like and I had buried it pretty deep, right? And so yeah, before that movie, I'm like, whatever, I'm just doing life, right? As best as I can do life. And so I saw that movie and listened to the panel afterward and all that. And I just noticed I just kind of everything just kind of started drawing in. Like it was almost like I was was there, but I wasn't there. And I walked out of the room and I'm driving home that night and I'm just barely able to not have a panic attack. And I had never felt anything like this before. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Ironically, a week later, I was sitting with you in ceremony, right? But that intervening week between watching that movie and our ceremony, like I was like on the edge the entire week. It was just like I was just this close from just totally losing my shit.
Hmm.
So that ceremony, literally, like it, like it completely released all of that, baggage, that residue, that energy, and yeah, one of the most powerful ceremonies I've ever had. And and because of that ceremony, yeah, I haven't had any issues since. Like as far as, that goes. So it was definitely like a one and done thing where, you know, in that case, ayahuasca got in there, cleaned everything out. And yeah, we've obviously sat in ceremony since, and other, other stuff comes up, right? But that piece was definitely a very cathartic experience for me.
When you reflect on that ceremony, um, like what are your kind of some of like your biggest takeaways in terms of like you had said, man, I just buried this stuff. I just kind of buried it so deep. Do you feel like you were being protected because dealing with it full front face on, it would have been too overwhelming? And maybe seeing that video and it started peeling back the layers where whether it's you're realizing maybe things you're burying deep, or wow, like there's a lot of inside of me that I just haven't really wanted to reopen. When you look back on that ceremony, what were kind of maybe some biggest, like, wow, I never saw that coming, or a perspective shift, or something that you're like, geez, like I hadn't, I guess, yeah, like these different perspective shifts or emotional shifts that you were like, you couldn't have told me that this is what I was doing and I would have believed you, but now seeing it, feeling it, experiencing it, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't in that space of PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was there's one big takeaway, or there was one big part of that experience that I'll share that was especially impactful. So I rarely watch war movies, and I never quite knew why. But in that ceremony, I realized that the thing about movies is they don't convey the smell of the battlefield. So in that ceremony, like I realized that I literally almost been blocking my sense of smell, and in a lot of ways, like holding my breath, like not being able to fully inhale and take in like you know, the smell of life, right? And
Mm.
the reason for that is, one of the most uh, impactful smells on the battlefield that you'll ever, encounter is the smell of burnt flesh. And that's a smell that you just never forget. And and the other thing about the smell is it's our oldest and deepest sense. Like, it's way down in there. And but it was amazing because in that ceremony, it literally like gave me permission to smell again and like take in the full flavor and aroma and essence of life through that sense. And so that's one piece of that I'll never forget. And that caught me completely by surprise.
Mm.
I was like, where did that come from? But it's like, but that was definitely like a linchpin thing. Because it's like when literally like when you're not breathing through when you have half your breathing mechanism that you're really not using that like to your fullest, it can really restrict you. And but yeah, so that was a big thing. And war is a crazy thing, Joey, in that when I was over there, I had drank the Kool-Aid. I thought we're fighting the good fight, we're on the right side. And but one of the things they do in training, and then when they gear up for war, is they basically, part of it is they try to dehumanize the enemy. And the idea is if you can see the enemy as something less than human, it makes it much easier for you to kill that person because you don't see them as a person. You see them as, this, constructed enemy that like it's either kill or be killed. And one of the things I saw on the battlefield is by the time we invaded Kuwait, like the Iraqis down there, they were done. Like most of them didn't even put up resistance. They literally, when we encountered a lot of them on the battlefield, they had taken their shoes off and knelt down with their hands over their head. And it's a cultural thing that they took their boots off. Like, we're not going to run, you got us, right? And you see someone who's basically that helpless, and you realize, okay, these guys are human. Like they're just as scared as we are, if not more scared, and they value their life just as much, if not more, than we value our life. And and then you realize it's like, okay, but I was asked to kill these guys for what? Like for oil, for some religious reason, for just to take back some piece of land. And ultimately that's what we were there to do. Fast forward to 9/11. What most people don't realize, that first war in Kuwait back in 99, basically back in 1990, and 91, um, that was all about us setting up a big logistical base in Kuwait. Basically, Kuwait was strategically located, and we were able to go in there as the saviors and set up one of the biggest logistical base we had in the Middle East. And that logistical base was basically set up to be a big launching pad for the ensuing post 9/11 conflict in that part of the world. So they knew, even, and I say they, the guys who are, who basically orchestrate this stuff, they're planning decades in advance. And how do I know this? I know this from personal experience. I was a freaking, what, 15, 16-year-old in high school. And I had, a guy telling me about the conflict eight years before it happened. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So don't tell me that there aren't some people out there who have this stuff planned well in advance. And yeah, so it's crazy. And so you start to, I was an intelligence officer, so I got to see under the hood a little bit more than other people. And you start to realize what's going on, and you realize, okay, yeah, like there's some sinister shit here.
Mm-hmm.
And what really pisses me off, Joey, is it's the collateral damage that is never basically quantified or reported. And what I mean by that is it's our men and women of the armed services who come back with PTSD, with, they're basically a shell of who they were. And, from that you get, substance abuse, you get spousal abuse, you get broken families, you get suicide, all these things. And, not only does it affect the service member and maybe their spouse or their family, but also their kids. So it's an intergenerational decay that happens, out of these conflicts that have nothing to do with freedom or democracy. It's all about the fucking money.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about grabbing resources and controlling resources. And we're basically, sadly, a lot of the, service members, they're the pawns.
Mm-hmm.
They're the pawns. And I realized that even more so when I was over in Somalia. A couple of years after that, I was in charge of all the Marine Corps tactical intelligence assets in Somalia, while we were over there, which basically meant, since I was there, their commanding officer, if any of my guys had gotten killed over there, I would have had to basically be the one to write a letter home to their parents and basically say, hey, your son died, right? And I couldn't in good conscience write, a letter or bullshit a family and say that your son died for, fighting for something worth dying for.
Mm-hmm.
Because Somalia was even a bigger shit show than, what was going on in the Gulf. And, so it's one of those things where, in good conscience, I couldn't do that because I knew what was going on in Somalia. I knew, by then my eyes were wide open. And I'm like, this is fucking horse shit. And, none of our, not one American soldier or service member should die in this hellhole. And of course, they ended up and did. When I was leaving Somalia, my chief intelligence analyst and I were sitting on the aircraft, and we're rolling down the runway in Mogadishu. And we looked out the runway and we're like, how long do you think it's going to take for this place to blow up? And we both estimated 6 months. Black Hawk Down happened almost 6 months to the day that we left. So we knew it was coming. It wasn't a matter of if, it was only a matter of when. And we got lucky and basically called it 6 months before it happened. So yeah, in a nutshell, that experience, I tell people I'm grateful for having had the experience of, going to a service academy, serving my country, but I never do it again. And I wouldn't necessarily recommend it to someone else. I would basically I'd give them the straight shoot. I'd give them the straight scoop and say, hey, you can decide for yourself. but this is my experience. And there's a lot of shit that goes down that that you're not going to be privy to. And so that was that.
Man, well, thank you for sharing that. For those who are listening, there's some things that Will sharing that I didn't know. We haven't really talked about, again, just that. We've kind of just, as we've progressed, talk about other things, and you bring up some really fascinating points. One, I do remember you talking about the smell the next morning. I do
Yeah.
remember seeing that. What's really interesting that you were saying, you said like I was pretty much going through my life like with like on half, like I'm not even using these faculties that, like you said,
Mhm.
one of the most ancient, I guess, human evolutions is smell, right?
Mhm.
And if you can't breathe properly through your nose, right, not only from a smell standpoint, but you can't breathe to get you into a parasympathetic state of living. So you can't ever relax. You're constant fight or flight. Now, what's interesting about that is the root word for breath is parar, which means spirit. That's the root word for breath is spirit. And when I work with people, when it comes to breath work, I talk a lot about that. Is that to breathe properly, right? You have to slow down, you have to listen, you have to feel, you have to be vulnerable enough to just feel yourself and acknowledge your own existence. That when we're thinking about our breath, it's
Yeah.
literally we're taking time to acknowledge our own existence, and we
Yep.
we don't do that. So then post war, you have no connection to spirit, right? The other piece of that is like, to do that you have to slow down, right? That if I'm going to smell things, or you had said taking the full flavor of life, I
Yeah.
can't do that if I don't slow down. And in order for me to slow down, I have to breathe fully,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And coming up in that environment, especially in those kind of your teenage, early 20 years, now you've hardwired on top of the trauma, on top of the war, on top of all these conflicting beliefs that you're kind of uncovering. Now
Mhm.
you're kind of just frozen in that. The second thing that I thought about as you were talking was like, there is a realization of what compassion actually is. You are human just as much as I'm human. Your story's different. My story's different. We both ended up here based on who knows what, like you said, whether it's money, politics, religious beliefs. But neither one of us really in our gut wants to be here and die for something that we don't really deep down want to die for. And then in those moments, we can't be compassionate. We can't be loving. We can't be forgiving. We can't listen to our intuition, our wisdom. So then those core four pieces that make up what I call our spiritual medicine wheel are completely offline,
Yep.
because that's what you have to do. Now, again, wars have happened since the beginning of human existence, but then it leaves us fragmented, coming back, interacting, interpersonal relationships, family, spouse, loved ones, relatives, coworkers, colleagues, the way we communicate. And so now we've fragmented these pieces of us. And it, from when you sharing that story, I'm like, oh my God, it's like the reconnection, not only to breath, but like, holy shit, I'm reconnected with just compassion.
Mhm.
And that's a whole, yeah, you once that comes back online, there's no turning it back off.
Yeah. Exactly. And yeah, I love your connection, with breath and spirit, Joey, because and slowing down, because one thing I realized, and hindsight's always 2020, but I
Mhm.
kind of look at my life pre psychedelics and since I've, been down experimenting with psychedelics. And one of the biggest shifts for me over the whole arc has been my slowing down. Like that's been the hugest thing, right? And it's been gradual. Like it's not like but it's like, and to your point, slowing down to breathe, right? To just take that breath and pause and just be still. And, and again, when you're in that space, it's easy to connect to spirit, you know, when you're not in that, when we're going fragmented, going in 100 different directions and, running around like with our hair on fire, which I did pretty freaking well for a lot of years. Yeah. You have no connection to that. And, so that's been, I'm glad you brought that because that's been one of the biggest shifts for me is that. And it's been a journey, right? I mean, that was what back in 2017. And yeah, like it's I guess I'm not a fast learner, but over time I guess I figure it out, right? But anyway.
Now, talk to me now. Okay, so we have the ceremony. Fill people in on how you got into the hiking, the climbing Mount Everest, the K2s. Uh, so I want
Yeah.
you to talk about that. And I'm just saying this out
Yeah.
loud so I don't forget, because I want to know kind of after that ceremony where we met,
Mm-hmm.
what was that gradual path to where you're now have your own the badass coaching program where you're leading people on
Mm-hmm.
these psychedelic experiences, and I want you to kind of more in depth on what you do and your take on it. So I said that so I don't
Yeah.
forget. I want to come back to that, but how did you were you into the mountain climbing before that ceremony? uh,
Yeah.
then kind of talk to people about all of that.
Yeah. So back in the mid 90s, a buddy of mine who was also a vet, he introduced me or turned me on to a sport called adventure racing. And back then, the Eco Challenge was the main adventure race. So, in a nutshell, for folks who've never heard of adventure racing, co-ed teams of usually 4 or 5 athletes. You're hiking, trail running, mountain biking, whitewater rafting, canoeing, kayaking, riding horses, rappelling, just all kinds of crazy shit. I was riding camels in Morocco for one race. Um, and these race courses are typically 700 or several hundred miles long. They take anywhere from 1 to 2 weeks to complete. You can only move as fast as your slowest person. So optimizing team is critical. And the courses back then, especially, you used a map and compass to navigate. So as a former military guy, I was really good with a map and compass. So I was always the team navigator and usually the team captain. But so I was in that sport for about 7 years, semi-professionally, and raced all over the world, got into some really crazy situations in that. But clearly I'm comfortable outdoors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so when adventure racers quote hang up their adventure racing gear, one of the things that is a natural for us is to go into guiding. So so over the years after that, I got more and more into guiding, and I'd done some mountaineering. I lived in Colorado for 7 years, so I did a bunch of mountaineering in Colorado. Went out and climbed Mount Rainier with my brother-in-law, but I'd never done anything above whatever 14,000 some odd feet until, ironically, and I think it was 2015, I got sponsored to climb Kilimanjaro, and it was with a group of vets. So we literally summited Kilimanjaro on Veterans Day that year
Wow.
to, basically, draw attention to issues, around vets. And so that launched my kind of that then got me into the high altitude mountaineering, which I've since, guided Kilimanjaro a couple of times, guided Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in South America, 3 times, gotten over to Tibet or to Nepal and done a bunch of work over in Nepal, in the Himalayas, and yeah, just kind of all over the world with that. So um, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, Joey, but I know you and I appreciate the power of nature, and just how healing and how restorative nature can be. And obviously I'm a firm believer of that. The other thing that I like to do with my my guiding stuff, my adventure guiding stuff, is as you can tell by my background, I like to push the limit. Like for me it's not necessarily communing with nature in a meditative way, although I do that when we're doing psychedelics in nature. But for my adventure clients, it's like, all right, I want them to push their limits. We're going to go across the Grand Canyon in 11 hours, right? We're going to cover 22 plus miles, drop 5,000 feet down and climb over 5,000 feet out, and we're going to do it in 11 to 12 hours. For most people, that is a big piece of work, right? But it pushes them. Like they find their limits. And for a lot of them, they realize, oh shit, like I underestimated the task and overestimated my ability. And that is not a good place to underestimate the Grand Canyon and overestimate your ability to do it. So, but that's why I'm there to basically sort their shit when things start to get sideways and make sure they get out alive. And they get out and they're like, I've never had a client disappointed. And what opens up for them when they push themselves to that extent, they discover parts of themselves that they hadn't tapped into, right? So it may be a quote physical evolution, but at some point, like they're digging out into their spirit and into their they're finding places in them that they didn't know about, and they're coming up against their shit, and they're having to get it sorted really fast to make it through. And they come out the other side and they're like, holy shit, that was so much more than I ever thought that I ever could have imagined. So yeah, that's a little bit about the adventure side of my business. And then yeah, on the coaching, and then I like to, for clients who I work with psychedelics with, I love to get them out into nature, in a more meditative environment, right? Where we're taking a flow dose of psychedelics and we're just really communing with nature and connecting with it. You and I have been on, outside, and psychedelics love nature, right? I mean, it's like that's where you can open up, and I like to say, you connect with your true nature in Mother Nature.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Okay, so post that ceremony,
mhm.
I guess, how did you begin to progress, or what was it about that ceremony that you were like, I want to keep following this path?
Mhm.
Kind of walk me through that process to where you now are leading
Yeah.
outdoor psychedelic experiences with not only your background, your experience now, your education now.
Mhm.
Kind of walk me through how that all evolved.
So, back then, back in the late teens, as you well remember, there wasn't a whole lot of support around psychedelic experiences. You maybe had a little phone call before to prep, 30 minutes, hey, this is the logistics of it. And then afterward, you were probably lucky to get a phone call after and say, hey, how are things going? So I realized, as I was, moving through my early psychedelic experiences, and then kind of what came through in my psychedelic experiences is to be able to support people in the preparation for their experience and then the integration of their experience. So that got me, I say got me, when I through a number of ceremonies with psilocybin with the mushrooms, I basically, was, you know, gaining access to, okay, like this is what you need to do. This is how you need to support your community and people who are interested in psychedelics. So that led me into the coaching arena. Um, and, I got a couple of coaching certifications that were completely not related to psychedelics, like, just straight up coaching. Um, because I didn't want my coaching credentials to be, like,
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to be a good coach. And then the psychedelic piece was on top of it. And as I've just been developing my program, I call it psychedelic catalyzed coaching, where it's like for clients who are open to it, it's like, hey, yeah, we can coach you, and the psychedelics are going to catalyze the process. It's not about the shiny object. It's not about the psychedelics. It's about you as a person basically meeting yourself, you know, getting to know yourself at a level you've never gotten to know yourself, being able to free your spirit, that spirit is, potentially life is beaten down for however long you've been on the planet, and you've lost touch with that deep inner wisdom. And in a lot of cases, whether it's trauma or whatever, it's like, we've been overtamed. It's like, connecting with that primal aspect of ourselves and really realizing the power that we have, because spiritual power, I call it the power of the spirit. It's unstoppable.
Mm-hmm.
When you tap into that energy, then, you're cooking with jet fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of it in a nutshell, Joey, as far as, that. And since then, putting the coaching pieces together, and, I've done some facilitator training with 5-MeO DMT and Bufo, and, really, hone my facilitator skills. Um, Being able to develop what I call my psychedelic living program,
Mm-hmm.
and, basically just integrating psychedelics consistently, especially at lower doses. And really, you've been in the fitness industry your whole life. you know the more consistent you are with something, the greater an impact it's going to have on people. And and in my opinion, it's the same with, if you want to be a master at anything, you need to do it consistently. You need to have a practice around it. Same goes with psychedelics. Yeah, you can do a one and done, but it's just going to be a one-off experience. If you can develop a consistent rituals and practice, that incorporate psychedelics in a very intentional and directed way that, support your life will look a heck of a lot different. And I know you've experienced it, right? I've experienced it. So yeah, it's an ongoing journey for me, brother. It's like I'm developing, offerings and programs all the time, and it's, you can tell I dig it.
Yeah, I know that you do. I think that's, to peel back the curtain a little bit, is like the reason, again, I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk about this because I've seen your development outside of
Mhm.
psychedelics. I think that's, for me, even when I'm working with people, that's the last thing that I lean on. It's like, hey, man, there's
Mhm.
all these other things that need to happen before.
Mhm.
So then when you actually, quote unquote, do the experience or have your ceremonial, you're able to not only understand what's going on, you're able to apply that wisdom into your life because you have a system. You have started to build the structure, create the environment, make some of these hard changes, or whether it's through actual the way that you live, the people in your circle, the
Mhm.
conversations you're having. You've already kind of set up the scaffolding.
Yep.
And then the psychedelics can come in, whether again, it could be ayahuasca, wachuma, psilocybin mushrooms, 5-MeO,
Mhm.
bufo, MDMA, sassafras. Uh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of different ways. And
Mhm.
I think for me, what is beautiful is like you lived such like an integrated life. And what I mean by that is that the things that you've experienced, you had to be there. You have to be there,
Mhm.
right? To go through war, to go through the mountains, to go through the adventure racing. You have to be there.
Mhm.
There is no check out. There is no daydreaming. There is no, it's like you have to be present through this. And when you take someone through an experience or coaching, I think that's what separates it, real coaches from poor coaches. What I call it is, when I work with people, I say they're styrofoam coaches, styrofoam cup coaches, meaning they look like a cup, they act like a cup, they can hold water, coffee, they can hold anything you want. But that styrofoam coach, as soon as you put a little bit pressure, the cup crumbles.
Mhm.
We're looking for
Yeah.
uh, uh, that gold plated coach
Yeah.
cup. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's what
Yeah.
we're trying to develop. And I think that you being through all that, it makes you that gold, that holy grail cup. It's like, hey man, nothing's gonna shake me. So
Yeah.
if you do need to talk about something, if there is some inner demons that need to be cleared out, I got you.
Yeah.
Because in real life, you have been through some of the scariest things, and you've shared with me some things on your hiking adventures that have gone sideways, and it's just like, oh shit. It's like,
Mhm.
well, yeah, you got to problem solve. And
Yeah.
so you having through all that, I think really, when I saw, because I know you've been kind of developing this for a while, but now that you've kind of really launched it, here's my program, the Badass Coaching. to see it, I'm like, yeah, dude, Will's doing it, man. And like he has these stripes that you've earned pre-psychedelics, post-psychedelics, and even the coaching. So all the coaching certifications that I have, all the things that I have, I did before I even knew what psychedelics were,
Hmm.
right? And then
Yeah.
that's what I mean is, well, yeah, the psychedelics helped me not only clear out what was unnecessary from those programs, but hey, keep this, hone this, make it your own style. But the
Hmm.
psychedelics were like, here's all the missing pieces, not only for me when it comes to my own PTSD, my own trauma, my own alcoholism, my own addictions. Oh, we're going to now remove that. But the scaffolding was already laid. And I think
Right.
so for me, my trajectory was a lot different in terms of integration or when I had to make changes or I had to pivot, whether it's friendships, mentorships, teachers, relationships. I was not only able to make those changes, but then I could learn how did I contribute to the dysfunction of this relationship or this perspective or this lack of communication. I can own up to that. I will learn. I will do my best moving forward. But then I don't have to stay stuck. I don't have to stay repeating the same dysfunctional patterns. The psychedelics didn't do that for me. Ayahuasca didn't do that for me, right? The other stuff that I did pre gave me the courage, the tools, the mindset, the practices. But the psychedelics were like, here's why you need to do it. Here's how these things are adding to dysfunction in your life or disharmony in your life.
Yeah.
That's why you have to apply these tools. And I think for me, as I started to see that more and more clear, I'm like, oh, that's what's so important. And one of the and even just to our friendship is like, well, you're just a down to earth person still. You know, just for those listening, if I didn't ask Will to share some of those things, he would never talk about them. Like I remember it was a while after I was getting coffee and just hanging out that you told me, oh yeah, I summited this mountain. I was like, wait, what? Wait, hold on a second. Let's rewind for a second. What the fuck, man? Because you never talked about like your accomplishments or the things, the greatness that you've done. And I was like, dang, dude, this guy really is teaching me how to be more humble. You know, he's not coming from a place of arrogance. He doesn't even talk about these things. Only if you ask him, only if you might know, then he'll share. But other than that, it doesn't matter. Like that doesn't make me who I am. You know, you again, 2020 hindsight, and I'm just applying the wisdom currently, but that's not where I'm leading from. And I guess my next question would be, how did you get to a place where, and if I'm misunderstanding or misinterpreting, let me know, you went from a place of leading and coaching from your head to leading and coaching with your heart. Is there a moment where you kind of realized that, or was it just the natural progression of like, whoa, I'm in my heart now, and it kind of is this identity of soldier, war, adventure, mountain, go, 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 kind of just like the grit to where it's like dissolved a little bit and it's more of like, oh, I'm in the heart space. That's
Hmm.
where I want to lead people from. Was there a moment that you realized that, or did it just kind of happen and you were like, wait, what's going on here?
Yeah, it just kind of happened, Joey. And how I would describe it is, whenever you learn something new, and in this arena, we're talking about like coaching, right? And formalized coaching structures. And but whenever you learn something new, it always generally starts in the head, right? We want to understand it first and get a deeper understanding and figure out everything we need to figure out. Once I had a deep enough understanding, mentally, then I realized, okay, like I can relax. Like I don't have to think my way through this anymore, right? And then it's like when I was able to get out of that, then I was able to more authentically show up as a person, right?
Mm,
Not just a coach, but as a person. And and when I was able to get into that more me space of who am I, and that's when my life experiences were able to really come to the forefront, and I was able to be like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, the coaching knowledge was important, but it's the life experience that is going to resonate with people. And people are, that's what's going to, either people are going to be attracted to that and want me to coach them or not, which is fine. I don't take it personally, right? But, but it's like, as long as I'm in that space of, hey, this is who I am, this is what this is, you know, and, so the programs I offer, they come from the heart, right? They come from that, that wisdom that you gain over a lifetime of just living and experiencing some crazy stuff. And yeah, so that, I think in a nutshell, that's basically how it went down and how it's, it continues to go down, right? It's like, the more I can show up fully present, at moment to moment, interaction to interaction. And this, the more you can be present, like that's what connection is all about. That's true connection, is being able to just be present with someone, all of someone, and be vulnerable enough to show them all of you, when it's, obviously when it's appropriate, but be willing to, hey, like, yeah, like, this is who I am. Who the fuck are you? And people are like, oh, okay, yeah, like, I can, I don't have to hide behind this, or I don't have to, fuck about with that. It's like, yeah, I can, yeah, show who I am. And
Let me ask you this: through your sorry, you just said some really awesome stuff, so I wanted to put some tobacco on that,
yeah.
Uh, was there a, I guess, what are some things that you've learned about yourself through the psychedelics that were maybe kind of surprising to you around your own, um, I guess, emotional evolution that you're like,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, I didn't think that I was like that, but
Mm-hmm.
I am like that. And I'll give you an example just real quick for me. So I think, for the longest time, so many people, you move so fast, you need to slow down, you need to slow down, you need to slow down. And I'm always like, what are you I'm just moving at my speed. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
do you mean? Like, I don't see myself moving fast, right? I think that's where you and I get along well. Is like we could just hair on fire. What are you guys talking about? What fire?
Right.
Like we know what are you talking about?
Yeah.
We gotta pick up the tempo in here,
Yeah. Yeah.
But the shocking thing for me is when I actually did slow down, I realized not only do I actually really like slowing down, but the reason I moved so fast in my life is because I was forced to. I was forced to make decisions. I was forced to react. I was forced to be impulsive. And it became my personality. And over these 10 years of sitting in ceremonies, plus the 7 years of therapy and books and counseling and coaching programs that I went through pre psychedelics, I realized I actually move really slow. But even when I'm moving slow, it's still going to be faster than most people, which I've learned to accept that and being able to communicate to people, hey, am I moving too fast? Am I talking too fast? Do you understand? A lot of people say, you always ask me, like, do I understand? I'm like, because I want to make sure that I'm not, uh, uh, you're not missing any of the details.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, it makes sense in my head, but I don't know if it makes sense in your head. So I want to make sure. But I like that. I like moving slow. I like having space. I don't like cramming my schedule anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it was shocking in the sense of like, wow, I didn't realize that I not only like that, that is actually my real nature, but my life forced me to speed up. And now the unraveling of that and the genuine slowing down, when I have to speed up more than I want to, that's when I can, whoa, things are moving fast. And I think that was so shocking for me to be like, God, I never would have thought I'd like going slow. Like I never
Mm-hmm.
would have thought that I would enjoy it. And so for you through this process, has there been different things that you're like, whoa, I didn't either realize about that myself or just those are things I actually now enjoy, which 10, 15 years ago, you couldn't have told me I would be this person or enjoy these emotional aspects of my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Joey, because and I'm glad you brought up the whole speed thing, or the pace of life, right? Or the rhythm. And what I've realized is that I was, running away from emotional connection. Like if I could move fast enough, then I wouldn't have to emotionally connect. If I
Mm,
could be busy enough, then I could just, like it was literally I'll distract, I'll move so fast. We're not going to have time to emotionally connect. So it was literally like, my pace in a lot of ways kept me from, yeah, having to feel.
mm.
And it's one of the huge things that psychedelics, that I've experienced through sits is that I actually have deep empathy.
Oof.
I was just terrified of it.
Ooh.
Yeah. And
Can
it
I
was
ask?
only in the slowing down. It was only in the slowing down that I was able to really tap in to that empathy. And and it started, with empathy for myself, like allowing all the shit in here, like, oh yeah, you're human and you got some fucked up shit going on in here, and it's okay. Like you can allow for that, you can accept that, you can embrace it. And the deeper I was able to do that internally, the more I was able to connect vulnerably and intimately with the other in a very empathetic way. So that's been the biggest shift by far for me with psychedelics and being and I like that's what that's one of the huge lessons I've had. And yeah, and it started with slowing down.
Let me ask you this. What about empathy scared you?
I that level of connection, you have to, at least in my experience of it, I think what scared me is that if I could feel that deeply, could I not take it on? Like how could I feel that deeply and just allow it to pass through me, and just almost like a wave, so that so literally that I wouldn't like carry that pain and the suffering of the other. So a lot of it was like teaching me how to be empathetic, how to feel that in the other and not take it on.
Mm,
That was, and I think that was the big fear, it's like, oh, if you feel that deeply, inside of yourself, you're gonna freak yourself the fuck out. And then, so as I was able to shed that internally and realize I don't have to carry this anymore. Like I can let that pain go. I can let that suffering go. As I learned to do it internally through my ceremonies, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, now you can open up and it's safe. Like it's safe to
mm,
feel the other, right? And it was a safety thing.
oh,
But the only way you get there, the only way I could get there was to go as deep as I could into the darkest recesses of my being, the most hellish, evil, sinister parts of myself. And like, you know, let it go and
I
just,
yeah. I
anyway.
love yeah, no, I love that you said that because that's what a lot of my I've had many amazing, just wonderful, beautiful ceremonies, but I tell people, I say, yeah, but in order for me to get there, you don't even know the places I had to go with inside myself. like
Hmm.
the worst places I've ever been. And
Yeah.
I thought I was never going to get out.
Hmm.
I went there because I have to be able to feel that part of myself or address those fears or those shortcomings, those um, dysfunctions within myself first, and not just observe. I got to feel that.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
think listening to what I'm hearing is like empathy was no longer a concept. And
Right.
maybe conceptually I'm scared, but underneath that is that I'm actually going to have to feel empathy. Maybe again, not for you first, but for me first. I have to feel that
Hmm.
for me. And that can be scary because then it's like, well, I got to accept and um, it no longer becomes concept.
Right. Yeah. It's an embodiment, right? It's an
Yes,
embodied
yes, yes.
experience. And one of the first experiences I had with Bufo, with the toad, um, it taught me a very valuable lesson. And I sat a couple of times with Bufo back in like 2018, and they were just full liberation doses, and I basically got launched to the center of the universe. Don't remember shit. Came back to Bufo a little over a year and a half ago. Had a completely different experience because I got titrated in, gently. And probably 70% of that experience was just bliss, like heavenly bliss. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like I am connecting with the infinite, I'm connecting with source. And I'm just like digging it, right? And out of nowhere, the toad flips me on my head and just takes me to hell. Like takes me to the depths of darkness. And I was so confused. Like I was so confused. It caught me so off guard. I was literally on all fours staring at the facilitator saying, what the fuck is going on? Like at the top of my lungs, I'm like, this is bullshit. I was so fucking just angry and freaked out. And then, I come out of that sit, right? And I calm down and everything. It chills out. But I realized very like within 24 hours, I went for a long hike the next day, and it was crystal clear to me, the message. And the message was, listen, everybody is comfortable in the light. Everybody's comfortable with the bliss. You have to be just as comfortable in the depths of hell as you are in the heights of heaven. Until you can be just as comfortable and experience it fully in either extreme, you're not going to, you're going to be half a person. You're going to be half a facilitator. So, so I knew immediately, I got to go back and sit with the toad and have it show me how to basically sit in complete peace, comfort, acceptance, and love in hell.
Yeah, boy.
Right? Right? Yeah. And it did, right? It did. And the ironic thing is, you would think, oh, that's going to be a really dramatic, heavy thing. It wasn't at all. Like it dropped me in. I'm like, okay, this is what it is. Like it just boom. And it was like, it was peaceful. Like it was like, wow, like you can be this deep in it and just have an equanimity of like serenity. Anyway, so
There's a really
beautiful.
beautiful saying. I don't know if it's Carl Jung or Friedrich Nietzsche. It says, you can't have a tree with branches that reach to heaven unless its
Mhm.
roots reach to hell.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
one of my favorite quotes of all time, but that's
Hmm.
what I thought. That's exactly what it is. And most,
Hmm.
I think, people, um, that's, they want to go to the heavenly places.
Yeah.
But it's the ones that rock you like that that ultimately are the ones that change you because you feel things, see things, have to sit with your own hell, your own mud, your own darkness. Like you
Yep.
really got to sit with it, see it, feel it, but then you realize, oh, it's the same side of the coin, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm the one that's
Yeah.
alienating this. I'm the one that's this is bad and oh, this is good, right? But
Yeah.
when I'm like, oh, this is it's in totality, in infinity, it's all the same. And if
Yeah.
I can feel that, see that, then when I do have those moments of joy in that, I don't have to hold on to it. I don't have to grasp it. I can
Right.
just be grateful for it, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
when I go to those other places, it's like, look, this is going to pass. I'm going to
Hmm.
be okay. I don't need to lash out. I don't need to belittle. I don't need to, I'm going to work through
Hmm.
this and it will
Yeah.
pass. And the joy,
Yeah.
heavenly, beautiful moments, they will return.
Hmm.
And for me, that's why I am a student of the Tao. You know, these are all, it's like the Tao saints. Everyone wants to hang out on the white side, but it's like
Hmm.
actually you got to get good in this dark side first, this black side first, and then you're going to learn to navigate both worlds. You know, so
Yeah.
that's an amazing story. You know, when people tell me they have hard psychedelic experiences, and I'm like, God, that's amazing. They're like, What are you talking about? I said, in a few years, you'll see. You're gonna see, and you're gonna be
Yeah.
like, "Man, that actually was like the most transformative
Yeah.
ceremony." Because I remember our ceremony going back to 2017. It was a
Hmm.
very hard ceremony for you. People were like,
Yeah.
"Man, is this guy okay? Does this facilitator know what he's fucking doing?" And I just remember like, "Damn, this guy is. I don't know what the fuck's happening to this guy, but he is getting rocked." But then you look back, it's like, "Oh my God, that was like the catalyst for my entire path forward, you know? But
Oh yeah.
you don't get where you're at now without those kind of hellish moments, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay,
Mm.
before we hop off, do you want to share how people can get a hold of you? Share whether it's a website, social media handles, email. That way, people can kind of reach out to you and get more information around your coaching and kind of your specialties.
Yeah. So I got two websites, badass-coaching.net and then
Badass-coaching.net.
yeah, and then badass-adventures.com.
Okay.
So those are my main, websites. If you look up Badass Coaching and Badass Adventures on Instagram, my thing will pop up. Um, yeah, and like and shoot, like yeah, just reach out. You know, I think my email address is will.burkhart@gmail.com. That's usually a good way to get a hold of me.
I'll put all
Um,
this in the description too, so that way
yeah,
people.
yeah, and you can throw my cell phone number in there too. The key with cell phone is if you don't text me first and I don't have your number in my phone, I'm not going to answer. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so shoot me a text and say, "Hey, I heard you on Joey B's podcast," and then I'll be like, "Okay, you're good." But yeah, so that's about it, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Well,
then, everybody knows you, so you can give my contact info to whoever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll if they come through me, I'll tell them like, "Hey, talk to my man
Yeah.
Will." So,
Yeah, man. Yeah.
dude, thank you
Cool.
so much, Will, for coming
Yeah.
on, and it was awesome. I learned a ton about you today,
Yeah.
so I'm even pumped about that. So, yeah. If you ever want to do another one, obviously I'm always up for a great conversation with you. Uh,
Yeah.
if you have one where you even have a client that you work with that wants to kind of share their story, I'm always willing to have them on as well. So, yeah, man, thanks for the chat, Will.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate it, Joey.
I love you, bro.
Yeah. Love you too. Take care, man.